All right, folks, and we're back. So, yes, I have had a minor snafu where I was on mute and did not realize it. So I transmitted for about a good 5 or so minutes. So I'm going to back it up. So for those of you who missed it, here we go again. For those who didn't, hey, we're going to do it again. All right, so my apologies. So let's go ahead and do this one more time. Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what's going on out here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe. This is what you're looking for. All right, so the topic right now, unchecked conservative false equivalency. Just to wrap this back up, for those of you who missed it initially, what I was talking about, we had an incident where last month we had Ed Martin, who was one of the attorneys, part of the Department of Justice, who made the claim that the January 6th rioters were being falsely and inhumanely treated, just like the Japanese internment prisoners of the World War II war. Let's do this. So I apologize that we got to run through this again, but oops. All right, so one more time here. This is Ed Martin, interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. And as I mentioned, he made the statement that the Jan 6 rioters were being treated like the internment prisoners of World War II, again, the Japanese internment prisoners. Ed Martin, the interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, said in a message to staff on Friday that he's expanded the scope of his investigation into the office's handling of cases stemming from the Jan 6 attack on the Capitol and likened them to the government's internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, according to an email obtained by ABC News. Martin, whose nomination is still pending, or at the time was pending, by the state, has dubbed his investigation the 1512 Project, referring to the felony obstruction charge used against hundreds of Capitol attack defendants that was later narrowed by the Supreme Court. We have contacted lawyers, staff, and judges about this and sought their feedback. Martin wrote in his email. One called the bipartisan rejection of the 1512 charge the greatest failure of legal judgment since FDR and its attorney general put American citizens of Japanese descent in prison camps and seized their property. I agree, and that's why we continue to look at who ordered the 1512 and why. A lot to do. So we see right off the bat, this is false equivalency. In no shape, point in time, so we look at the fact that the Jan 16th rioters are anywhere close to being the equivalent of Japanese Americans who were put in internment camps. Japanese Americans did not attack the government. They did not go to any congressional building in California or any Capitol building in California and attempt to overthrow it, as the January 6th rioters did, who went into the Capitol building, shit on the floor, illegally entered offices, and for the most part, attacked the officers who were there. So again, this is a massive false equivalency. Dare I even say, for shit. All right, there's no truth in this. However, because of the current administration that we have in office, anybody's just directly pulled out of their ass statement can be made, and then they will find a charge to match it. I think it was called a self-licking ice cream cone, if I were to be exact. Now, the shame in this is that this is not the only instance where you will see a crime that was committed by the Jan 6 rioters likened to another instance where there was some form of imprisonment where they made the claim that the Jan 6 rioters were being unfairly treated. Absolute nonsense. Now, we all know this is a lie. We know that this is nothing more, again, than false equivalency. But this is going to be accepted by the majority of Americans who voted this particular administration in office. This is the nonsense that we're getting. Let's go further though. So let's have the discussion about Japanese internment itself. The internment of Japanese Americans during World War II was a forced relocation and incarceration of over 120,000 people of Japanese descent, including U.S. citizens, to internment camps located throughout the Western United States. Oh. Oh, hey, Alicia. Thank you for showing up. This action was initiated by President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Executive Order 9066 in February 1942. This order authorized the Secretary of War and military commanders to evacuate people of Japanese descent from the West Coast to internment camps. What's going on? Top Cat, how you do, sir? Shout out, much respect to you. And we just got conversation going on right about now. So again, you know me, I don't care how many people show up or do not show up because the replay game will be on point to check this out later. And we all know that I just need watch hours. Oh, so many of them. So either you're here at the time, great. If you're not, we know you can catch it on replay. So getting back to our list, forced relocation. Japanese Americans were given little notice and were forced to leave their homes, businesses, and possessions, often selling them at a fraction of their value. Moving down, these camps, also called relocation centers, were often located in desolate areas and were surrounded by barbed wire fences. Living conditions. Camps consisted of barracks furnished with cots and coal-burning stoves, with residents sharing bathrooms. Perceived threat. The government cited concerns about national security and espionage as justification for the internment, though these fears were later proven unfounded. Now imagine being pulled out of your house or led out of your house by gunpoint, put on a bus, and then taken to an area where you get off and you're pretty much in a prison camp. Loss of property and freedom. Many internees lost their homes, businesses, and savings, and they were unable to return to their lives until the war ended. Now, Hunting Wisdom and I were having a brief discussion about this before I started this podcast. I had asked her if she wanted to jump up here and give a little bit of information because, believe it or not, she is a bit of a history buff herself. So there are certain aspects that I'm speaking of that she also could add to. So look for us doing a possible collaboration more often in the future, in addition to the OGs of mine. Loss of property and freedom. I just read that, didn't I? Legal and political battles. The Supreme Court ruled in Ex parte Mitsuye Endo that the government could not detain citizens without charges of disloyalty. So let's think about this. All the folks who are being deported and sent to El Salvador or wherever else that the Trump administration is coming up with, did they do a loyalty or a disloyalty test with them? Probably not. They looked at their skin, looked for tattoos, and put them on airplanes in that order. Redress and apology. In 1988, the government formally apologized to Japanese Americans and provided a payment of $20,000 to each former internee. Absolutely to that last statement. Yep. Put them on planes, looked at them, judged them, and had them gone. Now, again, as I just mentioned, in 1988, $20,000 to each former internee. So obviously, who was still alive at that time. It sounds a lot like reparations, doesn't it? Impact. The internment had a profound and lasting impact on Japanese Americans, leading to trauma, loss, and a struggle for justice and recognition. Now, how filthy is that? To have your job gone, possibly your house, any type of property, financial assets, all that gone due to a suspicion because of the fact that you were Japanese. What if they decide to attack America from the inside by somehow secretly communicating with Japan? Another example of racism that has been a part of America since day one. But let's do a little bit more here. Let's go ahead and move over to Britannica. And now we're just going to look at a little bit more information pertaining to this. Japanese American internment, the forced relocation by the U.S. government of thousands of Japanese Americans. Oops, one moment, folks. Reparations, yeah, there was money given back, Alicia. But check the links here and you can follow up and take a look at that. With location Japanese Americans to detention camps during World War II. That action was the culmination of the federal government's long history of racist and discriminatory treatment of Asian immigrants and their descendants that had begun with restrictive immigration policies in the late 1800s. Now, when they're talking of immigration policies, they're referring to the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And this act was put in place because it was, I don't know what's wrong today. It was realized that there were more Asian immigrants coming to the country than white immigrants at that particular time. Plus, it was believed that due to the Asian immigrants coming in as such a flux, it was lowering the cost of work. Yeah, it was making it hard for folks to have a wage that they felt was reasonable to them because you had more Asians who were coming in and taking those jobs. All of this sounds quite familiar, doesn't it? After the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japanese aircraft on December 7, 1941, the U.S. War Department suspected that Japanese Americans might act as saboteurs or espionage agents, despite a lack of hard evidence to support that view. Some political leaders recommended rounding up Japanese Americans, particularly those living along the West Coast, and placing them in detention centers inland. A power struggle erupted between the U.S. Department of Justice, which opposed moving innocent civilians, and the War Department, which favored detention. John J. McCloy, the Assistant Secretary of War, remarked that if it came to a choice between national security and the guarantee of civil liberties expressed in the Constitution, he considered the Constitution just a scrap of paper. Goddamn. In the immediate aftermath of the Pearl Harbor attack, more than 1,200 Japanese community leaders were arrested, and the assets of all accounts in the U.S. branches of Japanese banks were frozen. So I want you to take a look at this, folks. See how quickly it took America to turn on folks, even though they were born, raised, and lived here. But due to racism, well, we can't trust them. We don't know if they're going to attack us from the inside or not. So let's play the safe bet and just round everybody up and put them in jail to be on the safe side. And I say again, the audacity of Ed Martin to make the statement that the Jan 6 folks suffered the same fate or were suffering the same fate. There's nothing in here that even proves this, and we all know this to be a fact. Now, I can't say for sure, Alicia, so I won't go out on a limb and make the statement of torture. But we know that there was injustice, so I'll leave it at that part. So here's a family that was put inside of internment. I think there was a narrative here for them. Here we go. The Moshida family, before their relocation to an internment camp for Japanese Americans. And here's a larger picture. So I'm looking through this. I can't. Okay, there's mom right there. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children. Can you imagine what it must have been like growing up inside of an internment camp? Well, think about this. What was it like for slaves growing up inside of slavery? The difference here is that this was a brief stopover for them. Now, I'm not trying to make any type of comparison, but I'm just talking about the life and perspective of having been free, living in your house, going to your job, earning your money, and then having that taken away and herded into a bus and put into a confined space, all because of the suspicion that you might be working with the Japanese, although you are an American. Think about that. Now, for a second here, folks, I want you to imagine internment going back to an early instance, not slavery, all right? We know that slavery is completely different. We know that Africans were brought over here and were here particularly to be work or to be work mules, all right? Nothing more, nothing less. Here to do the work that others were not going to do. But internment, that's something entirely different, right? But for some of you who may not be up on your history, did you know that the Native Americans were part of internment as well? They were referred to as the praying Indians. So I don't know how many people recall this, but yes, there was a point in time that the settlers even had Indians that were converted to Christianity. However, if there were to be an Indian attack, all of the praying Indians were herded up and put into a pen because of the fear that they might join in the attack. The praying Indians, Native Americans who embraced Christianity, were often subjected to internment and faced significant settler distrust due to their perceived association with non-Christian Native groups and concerns about their loyalty during conflict. This mistrust stemmed from both the colonist fear of Native peoples in general and the belief that praying Indians could not be trusted due to their conversion. Are you serious? Yes, apparently so. Praying Indians and early colonial relations. In the 17th century, missionaries like John Eliot established praying towns where Native Americans adopted Christianity and English ways of life. While some colonies saw these towns as a means of integrating and civilizing Native populations, others remained wary. Now, this is what kills me: civilizing Native populations. Now, these folks, by all means, were in their own societies. They were civilized. But of course, the Europeans are over here taking over the land, killing, or as you see, converting or imprisoning some of the local natives. But then the audacity to assume that they're uncivilized. Again, the audacity. King Philip's War and growing mistrust. I have another statement here from Hunting Wisdom. They wanted the natives to be civilized, but still didn't trust them. Yeah. How ridiculous is that? We've converted you to Christianity, and now that we've converted you, we have you participating in our customs. We still don't trust you. Wow. As colonial expansion and conflict with Native groups escalated, including the outbreak of King Philip's War, the praying Indians became caught in the middle, facing suspicion and hostility from both sides. During the war, many praying Indians were interned, often in harsh conditions, on islands like Deer Island. This internment was fueled by the colonists' fear that the praying Indians might be sympathetic to or actively supporting the non-Christian Native rebels. Now they're rebels. Settler mistrust and fear. Settlers often viewed praying Indians with suspicion, fearing they might be unreliable allies or even potential spies. Their mixed status, caught between the English and other Native groups, further solidified this distrust. The consequences of mistrust. The mistrust and fear surrounding praying Indians led to their mistreatment, including internment, violence, and even sale into slavery. The praying Indians' experience highlights the complex and often contradictory relationship between colonies and Native peoples during the early colonial period. Now, one thing I'm going to say here is that when they make this statement of being sold into slavery, the Indians, or at least the ones who were sold into slavery, did not go for that at all. They either fought directly as this trade was going on, or some would even kill themselves later rather than be to be a part of slavery. I just want to make that clear, which is why you did not see a lot of Indian slaves, because the Indians would literally refuse physically through fighting back, or they would take their own lives. All right. So as I said, it was a rather quick one, but it was something that I felt that I needed to do because no one made any type of stink about that article when it first came out. I recall reading it and it was a blip on the radar of the news cycle. But again, anything that you hear from this administration is so outrageous. How many people take the time to look at it and then think, that's a shame? You hardly even get that anymore because it has become normalized. Things like this don't even move the needle anymore. It doesn't even bother people enough to take a look, to check it out. It's become normalized, and that is a problem. I believe I mentioned that before when I talked about the Russian spy who was letting Americans know that you guys are lazy and Russia is going to have an easy time converting any of your folks or getting them to see different from the policies that you have locally inside of your country. And it all comes from normalization of nonsensical mess such as this. All right, appreciate it. Thank you much for stopping in, as always. And remember, girl, we'll need to get together and do something here later here, all right? All right, so that does it for me. So you know how we get out of here. Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we've got going on. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe. This is what you're looking for. As always, thank you for joining me in the conversation. John Henry out.